What if the apathy you feel weren't weakness, but the sacred silence of the soul awakening? Many seek spiritual awakening expecting constant ecstasy, a permanent euphoria that would elevate them above all human difficulties. But what comes first, what almost no one dares mention, is often a sacred emptiness, that disconcerting moment when the mind falls silent and the world loses all the color that once animated it. This is not the end of the spiritual journey, but its true beginning. When the mind finally quiets after decades of incessant noise, when the perpetual flow of desires and fears that consumed all your vital energy begins to diminish, the spirit can finally begin to paint from within outward. You haven't lost the capacity to feel. You've simply stopped responding to the false stimuli that previously kept you in frantic and meaningless activity. What seems like death is actually birth. What seems like emptiness is actually fullness not yet recognized. Today, you will discover why this inner silence is not illness or regression, but sacred transition between two completely different modes of existing in the world. You will understand that the interval between the death of the false self and the birth of divine consciousness necessarily includes periods of disorientation where nothing from the old works anymore and the new has not yet fully revealed itself. And here is the secret that will change everything. This emptiness you fear is precisely the space the divine presence was waiting for to finally manifest in you without the obstructions of the ego that occupied all available space. Paramahansa Yogananda taught with absolute clarity that awakening is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of the soul's true walk. Everything that came before, all the searches, all the practices, all the preliminary spiritual experiences was merely preparation for this moment when you can finally begin to live not from the ego, but from the spirit. The problem is that the ego, accustomed to the constant noise of external seeking, feels completely lost when the mind quiets and there is no longer compulsive impulse directing every movement. This not wanting to do anything that you experience now is the necessary interval between the dissolution of the false self and the full emergence of divine consciousness. Like the caterpillar that dissolves completely inside the cocoon before reorganizing itself as a butterfly, you are passing through liquefaction of all old structures of identity before the new form can crystallize. This process cannot be rushed without destroying the transformation it is preparing. Genuine awakening doesn't bring immediate comfort. It first brings destabilization of everything you used as psychological crutches. All the activities that filled the existential void, all the goals that gave a sense of purpose, all the identities that offered security. All of this needs to be questioned and often dissolved before you can discover who you really are beyond these temporary constructions. The discomfort you feel is a sign that the transformation is working, not that it has failed. But what if this period of apparent paralysis were actually the most productive moment of your entire spiritual life? What if more transformation were happening in these moments of forced silence than in all the years of frantic spiritual activity? What few understand is that the soul cannot build the new while still occupied, maintaining the old functioning. It needs this sacred interval where the old is released before the new can be born. Human desire is the flame that consumes spiritual energy relentlessly. For decades, perhaps entire lifetimes, you burned your vital essence pursuing satisfactions that never lasted, seeking fulfillments that never completely filled, trying to fill an inner void with external objects and experiences. Awakening finally extinguishes this fire of the ego, not because you became apathetic or depressed, but because you finally saw through the illusion that happiness comes from external achievements. When compulsive desire ceases, being can finally rest in its own nature. This rest is not lazy inactivity, but deep quietude where real healing happens, healing of wounds you didn't even know you carried, release of patterns that operated so deeply in the subconscious that you considered them an unalterable part of who you are. The non-doing you experience now is not absence of action, but the soul reorienting itself to a completely new frequency of action that is not born from lack, but from fullness. The spiritual inertia you fear is actually the sacred rest before inner revelation. Like the field that needs to lie fallow between plantings to recover its fertility, you are in a period of deep regeneration where trying to force productivity would only further deplete the resources that need to be restored. Trust this natural rhythm. Nature knows that after every winter comes spring, but spring cannot be rushed without destroying the seeds that are germinating in the dark. There was a monk who, after years of intense practice, experienced profound awakening, followed immediately by months of complete disinterest in any spiritual activity. He panicked, thinking he had lost everything he had conquered. But his master told him, "You have lost nothing. You simply stopped making effort because you finally arrived where effort cannot take you. Now you must learn to simply be, without doing, until action naturally emerges again, but this time from a completely different source. For countless lifetimes, the soul acted moved exclusively by desire, fear, and obsessive pursuit of specific results. Each action based on these motivations creates karma, not in the sense of cosmic punishment, but in the sense of consequences that need to be experienced and patterns that need to be undone. Spiritual awakening gradually dissolves the illusory pleasure you extracted from action without consciousness, from compulsive activity that kept you distracted from the reality of your own existence. The not wanting to do anything you experience now is literally the cleansing of karmic impulse, that energy that kept you in perpetual motion, not by conscious choice, but by deeply rooted patterns that operated completely outside your conscious control. When these patterns begin to dissolve, when the fuel of old karma is depleted, there is necessarily a period of apparent emptiness before a new type of motivation can emerge. Motivation not based on neurotic seeking, but on divine inspiration. Action, after authentic awakening, must spring from being, not from lack, not from fear, not from the need to prove something or fill some inner void. This is a completely different pattern of activity that most people have never experienced. And that's why it's so difficult to recognize when it begins to emerge. You are accustomed to acting because you have to act, because something is pushing you from behind. But inspired action arises because something is pulling you from ahead, because there is a genuine calling that resonates with your deepest essence. But what if each moment of apparent inactivity were actually burning old karma, dissolving compulsive patterns, freeing you from impulses that governed your life without you realizing it? What if the forced inaction of this period were precisely what your soul needed to finally free itself from cycles that kept it trapped for incarnations? What almost no one dares consider is that sometimes the most spiritually productive thing you can do is absolutely nothing. Just be awake without justification or goal, until the deep transformation is completed at levels your conscious mind cannot access. The ego is a psychological structure that feeds exclusively on achievements, external goals, and social recognition. Its very survival depends on keeping you constantly engaged in projects that confirm your existence and worth. When the light of the soul awakens and begins to shine through the cracks of this egoic structure, the ego suddenly finds itself naked and without real purpose. All the activities that previously seemed vitally important now reveal themselves as elaborate distractions from deeper questions. Then arises profound boredom with everything that once fascinated you, disinterest in achievements that used to consume all your energy, the disturbing sensation of not belonging to any of the social groups that previously defined your identity. This is not clinical depression requiring medication, but healthy existential crisis, signaling real growth. The ego is losing control, and it fights against this loss by generating sensations of emptiness and disorientation in the hope that you will panic and return to the old patterns of external seeking. But what seems like devastating loss of purpose is actually liberation from the yoke of self-image, that invisible prison built of internalized expectations, social comparisons, neurotic needs for validation, and false identities you used as a mask for so long that you forgot your original face. The discomfort you feel now is the discomfort of freedom for someone who spent their entire life imprisoned. Freedom frightens because it brings responsibility to choose consciously instead of following automatic programming. There was a successful executive who, after an awakening experience, completely lost interest in his career that previously consumed 16 hours daily. He tried to force himself to resume the old enthusiasm, but it was like trying to force himself to be interested again in children's toys. His therapist diagnosed depression, but a spiritual master he consulted said, "You are not depressed. You simply grew beyond the identity you were using, and now you need to discover who you really are when you're not performing roles that others wrote for you." In deep Buddhism, this state is called sunyata, a word that Western translators often translate as emptiness, but which actually means fertile emptiness, the vacancy pregnant with all possibilities not yet manifested. Far from being negative absence, sunyata is unconditioned fullness, the potential field from which all forms emerge and to which all forms eventually return. When you experience this emptiness after awakening, you are touching this essential dimension of reality. In traditional Hinduism, this is precisely the stage between vairagya and samadhi, between detachment from external objects of desire and conscious union with absolute reality. Vairagya is not forced renunciation that generates resentment, but natural disappearance of interest when you finally see the essential vacuity of all things that previously fascinated you. This detachment creates the necessary inner space for samadhi, that state of expanded consciousness where the separation between you and the universe completely dissolves. In mystical Christianity, especially in the writings of medieval contemplative saints, this state is described as spiritual desert, that period of apparent divine abandonment where all spiritual consolations disappear and the seeker feels completely alone. But the masters of this tradition always emphasize that this desert is not punishment or a sign of failure. It is final purification where the soul learns to trust in God even when not feeling His presence, to walk in pure faith instead of depending on comforting spiritual experiences. All authentic traditions, expressed in different languages and symbols, point to the same essential truth. The silence that comes after initial awakening is the necessary prelude to true communion with the divine. You cannot enter mystical union carrying all the baggage of the ego. First, you must pass through the desert where this baggage is gradually abandoned because you finally recognize it was always unnecessary weight, not precious treasure, to be protected at all costs. Sit now in deep silence, with spine erect, allowing vital energy to flow without obstructions. Don't try to do anything special. Don't seek any extraordinary experience. Simply observe with scientific curiosity the absence of will you are experiencing. Allow this absence to be completely what it is, without judgment, without attempt to change it or escape from it. Resistance to emptiness is what makes it painful. Total acceptance of emptiness reveals that it is not emptiness, but sacred space of pure potential. Practice conscious breathing. Inhale deeply while affirming mentally, "I am." Connecting with your essential existence that transcends all temporary identities and social roles. Exhale slowly while affirming peace, releasing not just air, but all urgency. All need to be different from what you are in this exact moment. This is not mechanical affirmation, but deep recognition of truths that have always been real but obscured by layers of conditioning and false identifications. Repeat this powerful affirmation with total conviction. Even when I want nothing, the divine wants in me. Allow these words to penetrate beyond the superficial level of the conscious mind, to reach the depths where fundamental beliefs reside, and from where they govern your experience of reality. You are affirming not irresponsible passivity, but deep trust that there is an intelligence operating through you that knows exactly what needs to happen, even when your small mind is completely confused about direction. Allow the emptiness to embrace you completely instead of fighting against it. In this total surrender to the present experience, however uncomfortable it may be, the divine presence that was always hidden behind mental agitation can finally reveal itself. Practice this meditation for at least 15 minutes daily, and especially in moments when the emptiness seems most oppressive. Precisely in these moments, if you have courage to dive deeply into the emptiness instead of fleeing from it, you will discover that at the center of emptiness dwells the fullness you always sought in wrong places. The secret that completely transforms your experience of this period is understanding that the truly awakened never stops acting. They simply cease completely to identify with the doer, with that sensation of being a separate self executing actions upon a separate world. When this identification with the agent of action dissolves, what remains is not inactivity, but activity of radically different quality, activity that happens through you, but not by you, that flows without effort because there is no internal resistance from an ego trying to control outcomes. Divine energy acts through the awakened in silent and natural form as breathing happens, as the heart beats, as cells renew themselves, without need for constant conscious supervision or effort of will. The non-doing you experience is not really absence of action, but God doing through you in such smooth and integrated manner that there is no sensation of doing. There is only spontaneous happening, natural expression of your deepest essence, without the layers of complication that the ego always adds to everything. When the ego finally disappears, when that persistent sense of being a separate self dissolves into expanded consciousness, life begins to flow without effort because there is no longer anyone creating resistance through neurotic preferences and egoic needs. Actions continue happening. You still eat, still work when necessary, still interact with the world. But all of this happens with extraordinary lightness, because you stopped carrying the psychological weight of doing something, of being personally responsible for every outcome, of needing to control every detail. There was a martial artist who, after years of intense practice, finally experienced the state that masters call mushin, empty mind. In this state, he no longer thought about techniques or strategies. His body simply responded with perfect precision to each situation without intervention from the conscious mind. He described the experience saying, "I was no longer fighting. The fight was happening through me, and it was infinitely more effective than when I tried to control each movement." This is exactly what happens in the life of the awakened. Life continues, but without the doer, and therefore flows with grace impossible when the ego is trying to direct. Don't fight against the spiritual apathy you are experiencing. Welcome it with deep faith that there is wisdom operating in this process that your conscious mind cannot completely comprehend. Every moment you spend resisting what is, judging your present experience as wrong or insufficient, you prolong suffering without accelerating transformation. Radical acceptance doesn't mean passive resignation, but courageous recognition that this is exactly where you need to be in this moment for the next phase of your development. Wait with active patience, not the passivity of one who gave up, but the alert presence of one who knows that something profound is being prepared behind the scenes. The new motivation will come when it's time, and it will emerge from the heart instead of the mind, from genuine inspiration instead of social conditioning. You cannot force this birth without damaging what is being born. You can only create inner conditions where birth becomes inevitable. And these conditions include patience, trust, and willingness to not know for prolonged periods. Do what comes naturally with total love and complete presence, even if it's just breathing consciously, walking without destination, sitting in silence, observing the movement of clouds. Transform each ordinary act into sacred act through the quality of attention you bring to it. Cook as if you were preparing offering for the divine. Walk as if each step were prayer. Look at the sky as if you were contemplating the face of God. This sacralization of the ordinary is direct path to complete awakening that doesn't depend on extraordinary experiences. There was a spiritual practitioner who, after years of intense meditation, entered this period of complete disinterest. Instead of fighting, she began to treat each mundane activity, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, watering plants, as profound spiritual practice, bringing total presence to each gesture. In months, she discovered there was more awakening happening in these simple acts performed with total consciousness than in years of complex spiritual techniques performed mechanically. The ordinary revealed itself as extraordinary when finally observed with eyes that sought nothing beyond what was already present. After emptiness comes fullness, not as replacement, but as revelation of what emptiness always was. When you have courage to completely inhabit apparent emptiness without fleeing to distractions, without filling the space prematurely with activities and identities, new but equally false, you discover that this emptiness is actually disguised fullness, presence so total that there is no space for awareness of being present, silence so deep that you can finally hear the music that was always playing but was muffled by mental noise. The soul learns through this passage through emptiness to act without desire, not as forced suppression of natural desires, but as spontaneous disappearance of compulsive desire when you finally recognize you already possess everything that truly matters. Learns to love without attachment, not as cold indifference, but as love so vast it doesn't need to possess or control its objects. Learns to live without fear, not as forced courage, but as natural absence of fear when you recognize your essential being can never be threatened by any external circumstance. The non-doing that initially seemed devastating loss organically transforms into being the conscious instrument of divine will. You still act in the world, still have preferences and make choices, but these actions now flow from a completely different center, no longer from the ego-seeking satisfaction and validation, but from the spirit that simply expresses its nature without need for specific results. This is the sacred point where the human and divine finally meet in creative silence that contains all possibilities. But what if this moment that seems the emptiest of your entire life were actually the fullest of transformative potential? What if you were exactly at the turning point where decades or lifetimes of conditioning can finally be released at once, where you can be born again, not metaphorically, but literally in terms of consciousness? What few realize is that the greatest evolutionary leaps often happen during periods of apparent stagnation, precisely because you finally stopped interfering with your own transformation through excessive effort and neurotic control. When you no longer desire anything because you finally tasted satisfaction that doesn't depend on external objects or favorable circumstances, the whole begins to desire through you, not small desires born from egoic lack, but vast aspirations that serve purposes much greater than your limited understanding can encompass. When you no longer want to do anything because the doer finally dissolved into pure action, love begins to act in silence through you, not romantic or sentimental love, but love as fundamental creative force of the universe expressing itself in human form through your unique and non-transferable gestures. If this message touched something deep in you, if these words named an experience you were living in confusion and fear, honor this recognition by leaving your like as affirmation of trust in the process, even when you don't completely understand where it is leading. Subscribe to continue receiving guidance that can illuminate the most delicate and disconcerting stages of the spiritual path. Share this video with someone who is passing through this emptiness after awakening and needs to hear that this is not failure, but necessary transition. And leave in the comments your own declaration of trust. I trust the silence of God in me, affirming that you choose to surrender to mystery instead of fighting against it, to trust the process instead of trying to control it. May the blessing of the divine envelop you in this sacred interval between worlds, sustaining you in faith when everything seems uncertain and empty. May you find courage to inhabit the desert without fleeing prematurely, wisdom to distinguish between egoic apathy and divine rest, patience to allow the new to be born in its own sacred time. May you remember in moments of greatest confusion that when you want nothing, the entire universe begins to move in your direction, not because you are manipulating cosmic forces through techniques, but because you finally stopped blocking the natural flow of grace through resistance and control. You are divine instrument being tuned in silence. You are seed of expanded consciousness germinating in fertile darkness, and you are exactly where you need to be for the next revelation that will completely transform everything you thought you knew about yourself and about life.